Good morning and welcome to Rising. Welcome to the first normal show of 2023. We're back in studio and wishing you a very happy first week of 2023. Briahna, how was your holiday break?
It was good, a little busy, but also restful. Had some fun, saw family, was able to visit New York, which I haven't done in quite some time. It's good to be home. How about
you? You
yourself?
were in New York partly, and you were in the Midwest. I was also in the Midwest.
Yes.
For the freezing cold temperatures and snowstorm.
You were driving. I just flew.
We spent about 30 hours in the car driving to Detroit, then to the other side of Michigan, then back to Detroit, then back to Grand Rapids, then back to D.C. I had every kind of weather, snow, fog. It was a lot, but the dogs did very well.
Yeah,
that was the main thing.
As long as the little Yorkies made it okay. I'm glad that you're safe, and I'm also glad that despite the drama of the roads, you avoided the drama of the airlines over this break.
Yes, and that is something we will be discussing later in the show. We have a great show today. We will also be discussing the Twitter files with journalist David Zweig, who's going to fill us in on the reporting he did during the holiday period. And then in my radar, I'll be breaking down everything you need to know about the arrest of controversial internet personality Andrew Tate. You won't want to miss that. But first, there are big things happening in D.C. today, big political news. Why don't you tell us about that, Briahna?
Yeah. Oh boy, Robby. The new year has arrived, and with it, the new Congress. The 118th Congress is set to convene on Capitol Hill this afternoon, marking the start of a new era of divided government, where Democrats will attempt to wield their slim control of the Senate to push through the remainder of President Biden's agenda, and in the lower chamber, Republicans are expected to flex their newfound majority in an attempt to sink the final half of Biden's term and lay out the path for a Republican successor. However, just hours before the GOP is set to take control of the House, Kevin McCarthy still does not have his votes secure in his bid for speakership. In a vote planned for midday today, McCarthy will need a majority vote to win. However, according to the New York Times, the representative from California is still short of the 200-odd votes he needs even after making a major concession, a rule that would allow a snap vote at any time to oust him as Speaker. Representative Bob Good, one of 5 Republicans who've vowed not to support McCarthy as Speaker, teased a true conservative alternative, but declined to say who that would be.
And as the GOP scrambles to make sense of the future of leadership in the party, over on Democrats' side of things, Senator Bernie Sanders still has yet to rule out a 2024 presidential run, even as other high-profile progressives such as Representative Ro Khanna appear to be circling the wagons around the president for his re-election bid by declining to say they'll run, even should Biden drop out. So Democrats bending the knee, Republicans not so much. This is wild what is happening now. McCarthy is making concessions. He floated, well, what if I allow the rule that says you can call for a snap vote to replace the speaker at any time? And because initially he'd said, well, no way, that's how they got Boehner out. And he said, well, okay, we can do it if it can't just be one member who wants it, has to be 5 members. And I don't know, Gates and the rest are sounding like that's no bueno, no deal.
Yeah, there was reporting yesterday about these closed-door meetings. People were tracking who was going in and out of Kevin McCarthy's office. There were photos posted of him moving his stuff in with the proviso that, that furniture, those items, those personal effects might not be in that office very long if he can't get those, I believe it's 218 votes to secure the majority. Mm-hmm. Now, as a leftist, I got to say, this process is all very familiar because it's what a lot of people on the left wanted to happen 2 years ago when progressives were in a very similar position of having enough votes to hold up the speakership of Nancy Pelosi, who is a very unpopular speaker, even among Democrats, someone who laces the campaign ads of Republicans across the country as the kind of stalking horse for why people should vote for Republicans and not for Democrats. And yet, despite that damage reputationally that she does to the Democrats, there was absolutely no receptivity from even the most progressive flank of Democrats in Congress toward holding up the speaker vote for any reason. And in fact, there was an incredible amount of misinformation propagated by both left media and centrist media that pretended if they were to withhold their votes for Speaker Pelosi, it would result in Kevin McCarthy becoming Speaker of the House, which of course is not a conversation that's happening at all. No one is saying, well, if Kevin McCarthy isn't elected, it's going to default to Hakeem Jeffries, because everyone knows that's stupid and dumb and wrong. It was only the kind of propaganda that was put out to try to excuse the fact that the left flank basically is neutered and doesn't exist and have any power. So there's a part of me that says kudos to the right for at least trying.
I know,
to
you're looking at this with some jealousy that they're actually...
I'm a green-eyed monster today.
It's funny. So the situation is, the way the vote works is very interesting. So it's a majority of people who show up for the vote. So there are 222 seats held by Republicans. They need to get 218 votes if everybody shows up. Maybe not everybody will. So it's a pretty close margin. No vote for Speaker. And then if nobody gets a majority, they vote again.
Yes.
And since the 1920s, this has never happened. It's always been on the first ballot.
Right. So one of the most cited examples of the last time this happened with some success by the left when we were doing this whole force the vote mishegas 2 years ago was over women's suffrage, where there was a period of, I think, like dozens and dozens of votes where there was no conclusive victor because people were holding out for advocacy for women's rights to vote. And it does create pressure. People say things like, well, you can't have government. No one will lead. They can't get anything done. They can't pass bills. And it's like, yeah,
don't threaten me with a good time.
Look, so this is what some people on the left are saying, is that it's easy for Republicans to make this kind of threat because their whole raison d'etre is to stop government from working. So it's a win-win situation for them in a way that it's not for progressives. I would argue that it is incumbent on you as a progressive that understands that we live in a two-party duopoly where most of the bipartisan things that get passed are actually detrimental to the interests of the people in the United States, to also gum up the works for things that actually matter and to draw a contrast between what you want and what the populace wants and what this corrupt government is willing to do. So we'll see what happens.
Well, in Republicans' post-mortem analysis of their midterm disappointment in this most recent election, much of the blame fell squarely on former President Donald Trump, who still doesn't appear to be taking that news all that well. On Truth Social over the weekend, Donald Trump blamed pro-lifers for the red trickle, saying, quote, "It wasn't my fault the Republicans didn't live up to expectations in the midterms. I was 233 to 20. I think he's talking about the House vote. It was the abortion issue, poorly handled by many Republicans, especially those that firmly insisted on no exceptions, even in the case of rape, incest, or the life of the mother. That lost large number of voters." Then he also said, plus stupid Mitch's dollar signs. So I guess that means how Mitch McConnell spent his money, which I always have to come back. But Donald Trump did not spend money on behalf of his candidate. So it's the lamest excuse. For the other part of the analysis, and I saw pro-lifers were livid. A lot of people in conservative media were very mad at him for saying this. I think you can make the case. You can certainly make the case that that did have something to do with the loss.
Trump is right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Donald Trump is right about this. The abortion issue did lose it for Republicans. People turned out overwhelmingly, including in red states, to just protect the right to choose. You can, the evangelicals can kvetch and say what they want to say. At the end of the day, Donald Trump is right, one, about his batting average, which I think was what that number split was in terms of his endorsed candidates' victories versus losses.
Sure, but you can the vast majority of those people are going to win regardless of Trump's endorsement.
That's fine, but I also think, per a radar I did a few weeks ago, I think around the time of Donald Trump's endorsement, that people have grossly overstated his failures. He lost big in some important high-profile races, but overall his instincts on these things have not been wrong, and especially on this issue of abortion. It did not have to be. It's one thing to kind of symbolically say that you're aligned with evangelicals to get them on board, but to follow through, to go farther than the litigants actually wanted in the Dobbs decision to overturn Casey and Roe, and then to be talking about, for some prominent members of the Republican Party to be talking about a national ban on abortion, is going to spook people in exactly the way that Donald Trump described. Just because the kind of a small fringe part of the Republican Party doesn't like what he's saying doesn't mean that he's wrong. And there's been some really weird responses from parts of the liberal commentariat about Trump's remarks, trying to own Trump and dunk on him for agreeing with folks that you shouldn't have overturned Roe. And that's Trump derangement syndrome at its peak, where you're mad at Trump for saying the things that liberals have been saying for a long time, which is that abortion rights are actually popular.
I agree with you that, and what Trump said about abortion did hurt. Yet at the same time, I think the major factor for Republicans not controlling the Senate is that Trump's Senate, the people he pushed in the primaries, won and ended up being failed candidates. I think other candidates, regardless of the abortion situation, would have won. As they're losing alongside Republican governors who are winning, I think they would have done fine, if not for...
Well, look, I think that some of Trump's candidates had really zealous positions on abortion that were out of step, so it's a little bit hard to disaggregate that. I did it my most recent episode of my podcast.
That's true. His Blake Masters, who I've kind of... attacked a lot on the show, right? He had a very strongly, harshly pro-life position that he scrubbed from his website in the final days of the campaign.
Right. So Trump has to contend with that. Yeah. Like, if he cared so much, if he really thought abortion was a losing issue, why back these candidates that had these positions that required scrubbing from the internet? But look, I just want everyone to not be so skeptical of some of Donald Trump's instincts here, because he's not going anywhere, and he's been calling some plays the right way, even though the Republican Party has had a really demoralizing electoral season.
Alienating pro-life activists within the Republican Party and conservative media would not be to his actual own benefit of his political career.
Isn't this the thing that people criticize Democrats for all the time, that there is too much kind of pluralism within the party, there's too many constituencies to make happy, and that's why the Democrats struggle? Look, the reality is that the Republicans are the same way, and the reason that they've been able to get away with not having to have trade-offs between members of their constituency is because they haven't actually won on some of these big things. Now that they have implemented these policies, namely abortion, they've got to deal with what that means about the factions within them, the same way that Democrats have had to deal with various successes on certain of these social policies, et cetera, over the years. And only time will tell what happens.
Yeah, well, we'll certainly be paying attention to this vote for the Speaker. We'll be talking about that more to come. And right now, I'll be talking about what's on my radar, first one of the year. Hope you tune in.